When a human or an animal dies, the body begins to decompose. Signs of decomposition are not usually visible to the naked eye until many hours after death. Insects, however, have the ability to sense the gases emitted from a dead body within minutes. These insects hold the key to crime investigation and help solve many factors that create mysteries. This is forensic entomology. Medico-legal forensic entomology is a subfield of forensic entomology that is formally defined as the analysis of the assemblage of particular species of necrophagous insects as well as their developmental stages in order to draw conclusions about the time of death. Necrophagous insects are those that feed on dead and decomposing flesh. This is a location-dependent science that is influenced by numerous factors such as geography, temperature, corpse location, and cause of death. During the fresh stage, or days 1 to 3 after death, there is an appearance of flies at the corpse. Flies are in the order Diptera and are easily identifiable by the presence of one pair of wings as well as halters. Flies are able to detect the presence of a dead body after minutes, and there is competition between them as they attack the body. Parents and hatched larvae feed on bodily fluids, and they eventually enter the body via natural openings or wounds. One of the most notable insect families that arrives during the fresh stages is the Callipheridae. These insects are commonly known as blowflies, which include greenbottles, bluebottles, or cluster flies. As stated previously, they are in the order Diptera, and there are over 1,000 species of Callipheridae. The flies in this family are known for their metallic coloring and blue, green, or black thoraces and abdomens. The blowfly larvae are pale in color and are known as maggots, while the adults are large and brown. The adults will lay eggs in the rotting or open wounds of the body. Green bottles are known for their metallic green color and clear wings. They are attracted to ammonia present in the urine. Another insect family that arrives during the fresh stage is the Musidae. These flies are commonly known as houseflies, and they are also in the order Diptera. The adults feed on bodily fluids, while their larvae are dung feeders. Lastly, Sacchariphidae, which are another family of flies, arrive later in the fresh stage. These flies are commonly known as flesh flies, and they belong to the order Diptera as well. These flies are identifiable based on the longitudinal stripes on their thoraces and checkering on their abdomens. They give birth to larvae, and the maggots will eventually use their scraping jaws to tunnel through the flesh. Predatory beetles are attracted to these maggots, and they will begin to feed on them. The next stage, which is known as the bloat stage, occurs 4 to 10 days after death, and it is marked by the presence of the beetles. By now, the body is bloated, and its smell has attracted numerous other insects, including flesh-eating beetles, predatory beetles, more predatory flies, mites, moths, and parasitic wasps that lay eggs on the maggots. The first family of beetles that come to feed on the maggots are the Staphylidae, also known as rove beetles, and Hystridae, also known as the hyster beetles. Then, 2 other families of beetles arrive to feed on the tougher parts of the dead body's skin. These include the Dermestidae, commonly known as skin beetles, and Claridae, commonly known as hand beetles. The hand beetles are a type of predatory beetle. All 4 of these beetle families are in the order Coleoptera. The moth family that appears in the Ctenidae, these are also known as the ctenid moths. These moths belong to the order Lepidoptera, and they feed on the hair during the larval stages. The active decay stage, which occurs 10 to 20 days after death, is marked by the presence of mites and flies. The body's fluids soak into the soil and attract soil insects. The larvae of Callipheridae, or the blowflies, which were mentioned during the fresh stage, begin the decay stage, and a strong odor is produced when they pierce the carcass because of internal gases that get released. The presence of adult Callipheridae and Musidae, which were the houseflies, decrease during this stage. Flies of the family Sepsidae arrive. These are known as black scavenger flies. These flies belong to the order Diptera. Additionally, the numbers of Staphylidae, the rove beetles, and the Hystridae, the hyster beetles, that were mentioned in the bloat stage now increase. There are two families of the parasitic wasps that are present during this stage, which are Termelidae and Chalcidae. Both of these belong to the order Hemiptera. It is important to note that the Termelidae prefer to eat the pupa of the blowflies, while the Chalcidae prefer the maggots. The advanced decay stage, which occurs 20 to 50 days after death, is marked by the presence of mandibulate insects. These insects include beetle larvae, which will continue to eat the dried body skin. Specifically, the adult beetles of the family Dermestidae, also known as the skin beetles, will be active during this stage. As mentioned earlier, these beetles belong to the order Coleoptera, and they can be identified based on their black, white, brown, yellow, and orange scales. The final stage is known as the dry decay stage, and it occurs 50 to 365 days after death. This stage notably has the greatest number of insect species as well as non-insect species, such as centipedes, millipedes, isopods, and snails. The insect families that are present include cockroaches, which belong to the order Blattodea, and adult Callipheridae, or the blowflies. Additionally, adult Phaeophilidae, which are also known as cheese flies. These are a family of true flies that belong to the order of Diptera. Also present are the adult Dermestidae, or the skin beetles. The body is dry and bones are visible. Dermestidae eat the skin and the Ctenidae eat the hairs. Because of the necrophagous insect development, time of death can be determined. Based on life stages and the size of the larvae, hours are correlated to give an estimate of time of death. During the egg stage of the fly, it takes approximately 8 hours to begin the first stage larva. At a size of about 5 millimeters, the first stage larva moves into second stage larva, which takes about a day for this transition to happen. When the life cycle continues to the third stage, the larva is about 10 millimeters, and this stage is reached after approximately 2 days. Around 5 days, the larva is about 18 millimeters, which then begins the transformation into its pupa stage, which can be approximately 12 millimeters after 10 days. The stage from pupa to adult fly can be up to 3 weeks. Now we are going to test your knowledge with a case study. The murder case of 22-year-old Rebekah Gold in Melbourne, Arkansas, has been open for an unsettling 14 years. To this day, the case remains unsolved, with no leads or suspects, only information on where and when she died. Forensic entomology has been used to determine her time of death, and she was last seen alive at 8:30 a.m. and found dead 7 days later. Rebekah's body was found a week later off a highway a few miles wearing a t-shirt and underwear. There was no attempt to cover or bury the body. Also, the weather was in the mid-80s throughout the week, and no rain was reported. The maggots found on Rebekah's body indicates a timeline that investigators were able to use to piece together the case. Rebekah was pronounced dead at 11 a.m. Monday, September 27th of 2004. The maggot growth was indicated that they hatched during the very early hours of Tuesday, September 21st, around 5 a.m., keeping in mind that the incubation site between 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Monday. She was last seen at a convenience store around 8:30 a.m. on security footage, which narrowed the egg incubation period to be approximately at 11 a.m. It is important to note that the temperature in Melbourne, Arkansas that week was mid-80s, which accelerated the insect's egg-laying, incubation, and hatching process. The incubation period took between 12 to 18 hours, compared to the normal incubation of 24 hours, which allowed the maggot size to stay consistent with her time of death. This also determines that her body was left at the scene prior to 5 p.m. on Monday. There are several variables that alter the results of a forensic entomology if done incorrectly at the scene of collection. First and the most important step is the time the insects, in this case maggots, were collected from the body. For Rebekah's murder, the time of collection of maggots was not described. Second, while the scene is recording the time for the maggots, they should also record the measurements of the maggots upon arrival. Unfortunately, in Rebekah's case, the maggots were not initially measured until they went back to the medical examiner's office. This allowed for the maggots to have additional time to grow, which can alter the timeline of the case. Lastly, the autopsy of Rebekah did not state species of maggots that were found with her body at the scene. The species of maggots is important to determine the growth rate of that individual species and if the weather conditions truly affected growth rate. It is general information that the warmer the surroundings are, the maggot growth rate increases. Overall, combined with other information and evidence, forensic entomology can be an extremely helpful tool for crime scene investigators. Forensic entomology can also be used to determine if a body has been moved after death. Specific insects live in certain niches, and when an insect foreign to that area shows up, there is an indication that a body has been relocated. Sometimes insect collection can reveal gaps in timelines, which causes investigators to realize that a body has been moved. Using insect life cycles, forensic entomologists are able to determine timelines for time of death. Dead bodies on soil release fluid into the soil, causing a rise in pH levels and result in new insects inhabiting the environment. A forensic entomologist can take a sample of the soil, and the organisms found can determine whether the body decomposed at the location where it was found or prior to being moved there. Now we are going to do another case study. The remains of 28-year-old Kim Martello were found on July 25, 1991, in Palm Springs Desert. Two transients found her body, and when authorities arrived, they were able to determine that she was likely killed elsewhere and her body was dumped in the desert. Her body was found 200 yards from California State Route 111, a mile from the city. Forensic entomologist David Faulkner found maggots crawling on Kim Martello's remains, but these insects should not have been there. The maggots found on Kim Martello's body weren't typically found in the desert, which indicated that her body was likely moved. David Faulkner noticed that her body was first infested with urban insects. Then there was a second infestation in the desert that she was found in. The first infestation contained city bugs, which indicated that she has been killed elsewhere. Her body was in the first location for a long enough period of time for insects to come find it before her body was moved to the desert, which more bugs located her body. This clue helped lead investigators to Martello's business partner. They were able to determine that he had strangled her in a warehouse and dumped her body in the desert. Another way in which forensic entomology is useful is by analyzing the appearance of insects. If insects are found with an altered physical appearance such as crippled wings, this may give forensic entomologists clues about possible drugs or poisons being involved in the individual's death. The specific drug that was used in the individual's death can be determined by larval extraction. Overall, forensic entomology is an innovative branch of science that is extremely useful in solving crimes. Thank you for listening.